All right, I cannot wait to speak with today's guest. He's an entrepreneur, brand builder, and the driving force behind one of the fastest growing smoothie and açaí concepts in the country. Transitioned from Wall Street to entrepreneurship, founding Baya Bar in 2016 and scaling the brand from a single location to over 30 locations in the past decade. He's been featured in Entrepreneurs Magazine's Franchise 500, which highlights his leadership and vision in the franchise and health food space. So, without further ado, founder and CEO of Baya Bar, Billy Loesch, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Lauren.
I'm excited to have nailed you down. You're a tough guy to nail down.
Yeah, I know. I can't even nail myself down sometimes.
Okay, let's dive in. You've always been entrepreneurial, and I want to start with a story before food and beverage. Goes back to the young days of Oriental Trading Company. Tell the story of why that's important to you being an entrepreneur now.
Yeah, a lot of people ask the question of when did you know you wanted to be an entrepreneur or, own your own business? And I like to, say, at least for me and what I've experienced, is that entrepreneurs are not made, they're born. And from a very young age, I think there's two different driving factors behind people who want to make money, right? There's people who want to make money through a profession that they're interested in. And then there's people who want to make money by doing anything that they have to do to get to where they want to go. And that was always kind of how I approached making money. It wasn't, oh, I have this huge passion for X, Y, and Z, or I really want to do this. It was, where are the opportunities? How can I make money? What is going to be successful? So at a very young age, one of those things was buying little trinkets and things from a magazine called Oriental Trading, my buddy and I in elementary school, and selling them to other kids. So we'd buy things for like, I don't know, like a penny or a nickel, and then sell it for a dime or a quarter. So it started off at a young age, and then it kind of just continued on from that point.
I love it. I do believe we're born with just the spirit for it. And I did hear that story and I loved it because people talk about, early days in childhood, where did you find the most joy? And typically I'll go back to my lemonade stand on the corner because I thrived being able to work and engage with people and be able to make some money in the process. I love that as a kid and I can see it light up my kids' world too. So I caught that. I wanted you to share it. So thank you for starting there. But I also heard you say something that was interesting, and we'll talk about your days on Wall Street. But you said, at one point you were investing one person's hard-earned money and taking it and investing it into another person's good idea. Bridge us for us, your time on the Wall Street and how that process kind of springboarded you into the environment you're in now.
Well, I will say this one thing about Wall Street. It's very glorified. The heyday of Wall Street, in my opinion, was in the 80s and 90s, 70s, 80s, 90s. It started to kind of calm down in the early 2000s. I don't know why. It could have just been from a regulation standpoint. The Cowboys left and things calmed down. From a tech standpoint, now people are trading online and on their phones. But I went down to Wall Street, and what it taught me, one of the really good things that it taught me was relentless, tenacity when it comes to business and having to negotiate. Everything in life is sales. And when you're working in sales, I mean, Wall Street, stocks, sales, that is like the pinnacle of sales, in my opinion. That is one of the hardest sales environments anyone could be in. So I felt that whether successful or not successful, just being in that environment and learning that world gave me a lot of tools that I then took into the next ventures. And it all comes down to sales and speaking to other human beings and negotiating deals. But yeah, to go back to the thing that you had mentioned, one of the things that I didn't like about Wall Street was I felt like I wasn't creating anything.
Mm.
I'm finding clients that have saved up money from work, whatever their profession was, and now I'm investing their hard-earned dollars into another person's good idea, into another person's company. And I felt like I was just middlemaning it. There's different ways of looking at it. You can look at it as, you're putting together good people and investing and helping grow businesses. But I just felt like I wasn't being my true creative self. So that was one of the leading factors of why I left. I really wanted to get back to my creative roots.
Do you ever miss it?
Yeah, I definitely miss it. There's nothing like the hustle and bustle of Manhattan and being down in the financial district. I love the financial district. I think it's the coolest area of Manhattan. There's definitely an energy down there and a way that you feel when you're down there. It just feels like money. It feels like old school New York. Um, but then when I really zoom out and I think about what that lifestyle looks like compared to what I have today, the commute, the crazy hours, the stress, very, very tough work environment. I have much more appreciation for where I am today, but I definitely miss parts of it.
Yeah, for sure. You're extremely talented. You passed your Series 7 on the first try, like we talked about, jumped right into Wall Street. Um, I want to know a little bit more about the risk taking. So you saw a lot of people investing. It's obviously just high stakes area. How have you utilized that as you started a brand? As we all know, starting something new from scratch, going from one to where you guys are at, which is well over 30, is you have to take some risks in there. Can you talk a little bit about that in specific?
Yeah, I think, what I understood from an early age was my appetite for risk when I looked at where I was in my life. So you have to, I think anyone who's getting into business, who's young, who's old, somewhere in the middle, what is your appetite for risk financially, personally, mentally? And I think, what I realized at a young age was my appetite was pretty large. I could take a lot of risk. I wasn't going to lose a lot because I didn't have a lot to begin with when I started. What was I really going to lose? I was really just going to lose some time. Now, as I've gotten a little bit older, I've kind of metered the ability to take risk is still there, but I'm a little bit more calculated with it because there's more to lose now. I have a family, I have a real business now. So now I'm taking things with more of a long term conservative approach. But when you're starting out in business, it really is a lot of risk. What I tell people is the more research and development you do, the more due diligence you just do in your, not only on your product, but what your competitors are doing, what other successful business owners are doing that are in different markets, the more information you take in, and then you couple that with hard work, the harder you work, you can mitigate that risk. So I've never looked at taking immense levels of risk as much. I'm trying to think of the proper way to say this. When I look at a really risky opportunity, I've always looked at it less risky than what maybe the average person looks at it as because I know I'm going to offset that risk with hard work and with
Yeah.
due diligence. So
Sure.
I think that's also increased my appetite to take risk because I always feel like I go into it well prepared.
It's interesting. The research and development can be a hard component to early stages because the more stories you hear from those that didn't succeed, it could psych someone out. Or you could use it for fuel and understand and really target, knowing what you want to stay away from. But I think it's not for the weary. You have to go in very confident with, what you want to do and why you're in it, so that you can receive all that information and not be completely psyched out by the horror stories that are out there. Because typically you're talking to people who've tried it and failed, and frankly want to share, what happened. So it's tough.
I'm gonna drop a fresh analogy on the podcast right now. I never used this one, but it just popped into my head. I've talked to people about the risks of starting a business, especially food and beverage. And what I tell, everyone that I talk to about starting businesses is the reason so many businesses fail is because anyone can do it, right? If you zoomed out and you said, what's riskier from a success to failure ratio, opening a business or flying a plane? I bet you the data would show that opening a business is way riskier than flying a plane. Well, why is that? Well, anyone can open up a business. All you have to do is come up with an idea, a name, a website, and a couple of dollars and open up a business. I'm sure if we let anybody fly a plane, the risk factors of that plane crashing would skyrocket. So again, I think that's where the information and the due diligence piece comes in. The reason so many businesses fail is because anyone can open up a business. The barrier to entry is very low. Whereas a lot of other professions, the barrier to entry is a lot higher. So that's why there's less failure when you look at it zoomed out. So what I could tell anyone who's thinking about starting a business or who has a business now and is struggling is you have to get educated. You have to do a lot of research and you have to emulate the people who are successful and take good points from them because they've done it.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're sitting in a very fortunate position right now. You are the founder and CEO of a brand. It's been very successful. I'm a huge fan. I'm in health and wellness myself. Live a fit lifestyle, and it's all fresh produce. And I want to get into hearing about it and allowing you to share, starting from the beginning. What was the original vision for Baya Bar, and take us back to the first location?
Yeah, so I had left Wall Street and I was 26 years old, turning 27, and I really felt like I was behind the 8 ball. I had a lot of friends who graduated college, they were in their said professions, they were making money. I felt like a failure. So I said, "Okay, what do I want to do on a regular basis?" And at the time, I was a little bit more focused on my fitness than I am now. Running the brand and having a family has definitely distracted me a little bit, but I'm working my way back.
Get
But I
back
was
to
a
it.
I was a yes, I have to. I was a 5, 6 day a week gym guy. I was in the gym 5, 6 days a week, and I wanted to get into a business that allowed me to continue that lifestyle or that was around that lifestyle, whether it was getting into fitness, health and wellness, or, healthy food and beverage. So it was really health focused to start from a personal standpoint. Then as I was doing my research and development of what would be a good business to start, I realized that there was a huge opportunity in the 5 boroughs of New York for an acai bowl concept. They were super popular already on the West Coast. There were a handful of brands that were getting really popular on the East Coast, but none of those brands had broken into the 5 boroughs yet. So I saw an opportunity, there was an opportunity in a niche market. And then there was an opportunity specifically in my neighborhood that I grew up in to open up a location. It was just happenstance, a conversation with a friend of my father's, and he had a location available. And then the rest really was history. So that was kind of what helped push me to start my own business and specifically get into the acai game. It was checking a few boxes. It was the health and wellness market, and it was also a niche opportunity in Brooklyn, New York at the time.
Incredible. You didn't have any experience yet in the food and restaurant space. How would you, looking back now, how would you say you understood and learned? Did you talk to other restaurateurs specifically? Was it really just your finance mindset and background, and then you kind of learned everything else by way of experience? Or how did you understand the nuances, even just from the leasing standpoint to just running with food costs and labor and all that goes into the challenges of running a restaurant?
Well, I think what I'm about to say is really important for prospective business owners. I didn't know any of that. And there's only so much that other people can tell you, right? You ask people for their advice and you're getting their own skewed perception of, right? You know, in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, we have, I think at one point Bay Ridge, Brooklyn had the most, or it was one of the areas with the most liquor licenses per square mile in the United States. There's just bars and restaurants and liquor stores and corner shops. So a lot of these people that own restaurants, we know them. I was born and raised in Bay Ridge. My father was born and raised in Bay Ridge. And you're getting their skewed perception on food and beverage. Oh, it's 7 days a week. It's 15, 16 hours a day. It's crazy. And I'm like, yeah, well, this is a little bit different. This is fast casual. So I don't think it's going to be that crazy. But also, why? what are the variables that I can control? Maybe I have to hire better people. Maybe I have to train better people. Maybe I have to create better systems that make it not so, overwhelming to run a business like this. So I really went into it with my eyes wide open that, hey, I'm going to make this thing what I want it to be. And
Yeah.
a lot of the stuff that I have questions to, I can get the advice of these experienced people. Some of it's going to be good. Some of it's going to be bad. Some of it just won't pertain to me at all because it's its own separate market. And then let's just start learning and growing and making mistakes. And it was kind of the mantra I had in the early days was not learn and then, try to perfect it. It was hurry up and make the mistakes now to get them out of the way. So I kind of just went into it. And I'll be honest with you, it took years. And still to this day, I'm learning. I could say that, right? 9 years in, I'm still learning a lot. But I had to learn a lot of these things through trial and error, seeing what worked, what didn't work, and making a lot of mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh. It is so awesome to talk to you because you are so transparent about the process and the reality of how that all feels. I love what you're saying right now that sometimes, just like I said, going back to the beginning, you have to take what you're hearing with a grain of salt. You knew what you wanted to do and you wanted it to work for you. Health and wellness is an important part of your lifestyle. You wanted to maintain that. Ironically, you're not anymore, or you're trying to get back into it, but I'm going to hold you to that. Um,
Listen, I'll be honest, I wish I could go back to the 5 day a week, 5 days a week at the gym. I think for me, I have to get better with time management. It's
yes.
not definitely not easy. And I can be honest about that too, right? Like a lot of these interviews lately that I've seen with entrepreneurs, they're basically saying, you know, work life balance, that does not exist. And,
Yeah.
you know, but that's not true either, right? I know there's a lot
Yeah.
of successful business people and professionals that have great work life balance. What I think it is, Lauren, and anyone, who's listening that needs to hear this is that there is not balance 100% of the time. And as long as you have a goal of getting to balance, then that's a good thing, right? Work towards getting balance. I know that it can't go on, in a certain way. When we have our head down and we're working on opening up 4 or 5 locations over 2.5 months, I know that there's not going to be, a lot of sleep happening. There's not going to be a lot of family time or free time or time to work out because I'm going to be exhausted, but it's temporary. So I think that is a big thing is temporary sacrifices for long-term success and long-term, you know, less sacrificing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's true. I mean, balance is seasonal, right? Or it's just it's all relative just based on the season that you're in. Like you said, you're in a heavy growth period. As long as we can all kind of section those parts and periods of our time out, I think, sometimes you can see the light and then separate it then. People would always tell me I overachieve in the dark because I get all my workouts done before 5 a.m. I have 4 kids, so otherwise I would never have
Wow.
time.
What time do
And
you go to
and it
bed? I have to know.
Yeah, so that's the next question. I'm in bed typically between 9:30 because my alarm hits 3:50, 4:15. But I always get asked, "Aren't you tired, losing sleep in the morning?" But for me, I actually arrive to the day more tired if I have not had that time to work out. So for those listening, and wanna try and figure out how to incorporate working out, I recommend getting up really early if you're able to go to bed early.
Yeah. And then you're a mother of 4. I have 3 kids, so we know what the answer is with that, right? It's having the kids regimented so
Yeah.
that they're getting dinner and they're getting cleaned up and going to bed at a good time so that you can then go to bed. So there's that huge trickle down effect of time management.
Yep. Yeah, I'm in produce. So people have said, with trying to figure out how to incorporate working out into your workday, I had someone actually suggest, I used to work direct with chefs to the produce distributor. Why don't you just run the route of your truck? And that way you can make the stops with the deliveries, see how the chef's doing, and then and end at the warehouse. And it passed my mind. I was like, wait a second, that's creative. I was in marathon training. I'm like, I could get some miles in that way.
That might work.
Um, Okay, so let's talk about the momentum a little bit. Going back to that first location, I always like to ask the question of how do you go from one to next? Did you going with the theme of not putting blinders on, but wanting to break things and figure out, make mistakes openly? Did you know with that first you were going to grow past it? Or did you have some metrics in place where you said, you know what, we're going to test it with one and these need to check the boxes in order to take it from one to whatever your, next step was at that point? Was it maybe just only sticking with corporately owned? At what point did you go from corporate to franchise? Talk to us a little bit about scale and how you figured that out.
Yeah, that's a great question. When I went down to Wall Street in my early 20s, my goal, the question that I asked myself was, what is the pathway to $1 billion? Is it possible in this profession? And the answer is yes, it is possible. And then there's, you fill in the blanks of the different ways that you could achieve something that big. Not that it's easy, or the odds are definitely against you, but what is the pathway? When I left Wall Street and I started Baya Bar, I said to myself, what's the pathway? Let me do the $1 billion test again. And I answered very clearly, well, the pathway is either franchising or raising capital and opening up a lot of corporate locations like a Starbucks or a Chipotle. So initially, I had the clear answer on what the pathway was. Now it was, let's prove the concept and then begin the scaling process. So we opened the first store December 28th of 2016. By December 2017, we had opened up two more. So we had seen initial success right out of the gate that gave myself and my partners at the time the confidence to open up another location and then another location. So within the first year, we had three stores. Each one was doing better than the last,
That's
and we said,
awesome.
okay, we're really onto something here. And then that's when I shifted the conversation to, well, okay, so now what is the next step here? I saw how thin I was getting spread by running three locations. I
Yep.
knew that opening up 10 corporate stores was not the answer. It was franchising. Um, and then that began the vetting process on the franchising side. And then I think by the end of 2017, going into early 2018 is when we sold our first couple of franchises.
What surprised you the most about scaling that early?
What was eye-opening for me at a young age was the need to trust and delegate. I am a very anal person. I'm a perfectionist when it comes to anything that I do and work on. And what I realized in the early days was this is not possible. You cannot scale a business like this. You know, Ray Kroc did not work at every single McDonald's as they opened, right? It's just physically impossible. So I realized that what's the goal here? Is the goal to have one or two perfect locations that, are absolutely unbelievable. Everything's running as smooth as possible. You're there talking to customers every day. Or do you want to scale this thing? You have to pick one or the other. I
Yeah.
chose the latter, which was scaling, and then I had to get really okay with delegating and trusting people, which again comes with its own, right, learning lessons along the way. But that was the thing that I found the most eye opening was in the beginning was, oh wow, you can't do this by yourself, duh, clearly, and
Right.
you need to start trusting and hiring a lot of people if you want to do this.
So, of trusting and delegating, which is probably pretty common in terms of leadership decisions that support, how one can evolve and grow. What would you say is something that you had to unlearn in order to truly scale or have success?
I think the thing that I had to unlearn was that old saying, if you want to do something right, you have to do it yourself.
Yeah.
Right? I
Yeah.
think that was the biggest one because I came from a very hardworking blue collar area of Brooklyn. So many people that we were around were hard workers, whether blue collar or white collar, just hard workers. And then, my father, a very old school guy, you know, if you want to do it, if you want to get done right, do it yourself, get it done. And then I just had this mantra of like, well, no one's going to do it like me for a very long time. And I was proving myself correct because I was doing a better job than everybody else. What I realized was, okay, not number one, that's no way to scale. But also, if you're doing it better than the other person, then you have to hire someone different. You have to
Yeah.
get someone who could do it as good or better than you. And then, someone who specializes in those things. So again, in the early days, that's not possible. You're not going to find workers that are as good as an owner in all cases. But if you breed good culture and good processes, those people will fall into place.
Sure. So going from corporate to franchise systems, it's got to be hard to pass over the keys to the kingdom in terms of just the culture. So what you envision Baya Bar to be when someone walks in, not even just focused on the flavor of the food and the quality of the product, but just the environment, the experience, the colors, the vibe. You've got locations in Utah, Wisconsin, Florida, Massachusetts, New York. Tell us how do you transfer that information? I obviously there's PDFs and books that you guys provide your new franchisees, but how does that truly happen behind the scenes for you guys?
Well, there's a lot of work that goes into creating these brand books and SKU books and ops manuals to give people the playbook of what stores should look like and operate at. But beyond that, it's really us being very, very um, hands on with the franchisees. This
Yeah.
is retail and it's food and beverage. So, it's a double layer of difficulty.
Yeah.
We have to really be hands on and be a part of these processes with them, be a part of the construction, be a part of the training and hiring. Go down there and be there for the grand opening. And I get behind the counter and I work most of the grand openings at the register,
Yeah.
leading from the front and showing them, hey, this is how it's done. Right. So, it, you know, having a franchise is very stressful because you want everyone to be successful. They're investing in your brand. They're investing their hard-earned dollars. You want everyone to be successful. Fortunately and unfortunately, there's pros and cons that come to the franchising business. On the pro side, you have someone else dealing with the day-to-day minutia, which is great, right? Because it allows us to continue to grow and scale. But unfortunately, you have to realize that not everybody is going to run the business the same way that another franchisee might. Everyone has their shortcomings, and it really comes down to, are they following the processes that we put into place? And as a franchisor, there's only so much we can do to ensure that someone has a successful location. So I think, from a culture standpoint, we have to lead from the front. We have to work very, very closely with these franchisees. And then we have to also bring in the right franchisees that we know will continue to carry this on.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I giggled at first with your answer because we just talked about trust and delegating. But I think a common business principle is in order to effectively delegate something, you've got to model how you would have it done, first. And just getting behind the counter. I love the visual of
Right.
that. It also gets you close to that community and understanding just the heartbeat of that unit and how it's going to perform and feedback would be quick in that situation. So I love that. I think people are going to pick up on that. Okay, I love asking this question, which is a little bit more pulling the curtain back, if you guys don't mind. But what is something that customers might assume just happens at Baya Bar pretty easily, but it's actually very either intentional that you guys do to support the guest experience, or is actually a greater challenge than guests might expect? So you can answer it either way.
There's a lot of answers to that question because there's most of the things we do at Baya Bar are very intentional. Everything from the açaí that we source from Brazil to the size and the design of the bowls. We like to lay the toppings out on a wider top bowl. So number one, it looks very pretty for our customers. And number
Yeah.
two, so it's actually easier to eat. A lot of acai shops do these more vertical style bowls, and it's hard to get
Yeah.
through the toppings to the acai.
Yes.
So that was something that was very intentional.
Love
Um,
that.
the music, we have, playlists, an approved playlist for all the stores. We want to keep a high energy vibe without expletives and songs that are not appropriate. So we want to have the right vibe in terms of a playlist standpoint. And
I
then,
love that.
what we're always working on behind the scenes to improve the customer experience is our tech stack. And one
Mm,
of the big things we did over the last few years was we started working with a company called Tap Mango, who does our app, giving Tap Mango a plug there. Um, and it's made the customer experience a lot more seamless at the register and ensuring they get the right amount of points consistently, whether it's a cash sale, a card sale, or on app. They're getting all of these points, which allows them to stack rewards and redeem them in store. So we're constantly working on these things behind the scenes. And the customers, they just see the end product of walking in, punching their number in, and getting their bowl. But there's a lot of intention behind what's in the bowl, what the bowl looks like, and how we're collecting their information.
very cool. Very, very cool. Technology is important. It's in all of our minds how we're using tech to better enhance the customer's experience while still supporting that relationship component. We're talking about that all the time right now. Um, how about trends? What trends are you seeing right now in the food service or just consumer behavior in general that have captured your attention or that you're keeping a closer eye to as you think about Baya Bar for this year and the next 5?
Yeah, I think, everyone's talking about AI, obviously. So I think there's so many different ways that AI can get incorporated in the business. On one side to help with back end SEO and data and things of that nature and keeping cost of goods down and tracking it properly, to more of the front side of driving customer traffic into the stores.
Yeah.
One of the things, not to reveal too much, but I think that simplicity is there's going to be more of a focus on simplicity going forward with brands. I think for a long time, brands started to become, jacks of all trades, master of none. And everyone wanted to offer all these different products, right? Like everyone's offering coffee, everyone wants to offer a milkshake, and I think now we're getting back to a point of let's focus on what we're really good at. Let's do it, make it really high quality, and focus more on the experience. So I think it's more like let's go back to more of an old school way of back in the day when you had these places that were just burger, fries, and a drink with a really good customer experience. I think that's what you're going to see in food and beverage. And I think the curve is also changing where you're going to have really, really, low cost, fast casual on the left side. And then you're going to have really, really high end, expensive dining experiences on the other end of the spectrum. And everything in the middle is going to start to get squeezed out.
Hmm, I love that perspective. How about challenge? What is the biggest challenge you're facing in your business right now? Or you could say in your position in the business right now? And how are you?
Yeah, I think consumer spending is definitely changing. I think a lot of brands are feeling that right now. Being that I used to work on Wall Street, I have CNBC on all day. I watch the earnings of these other brands and their reports. So I see what's going on with a lot of the bigger food and beverage companies, and consumer spending has changed drastically in the last 6 to 12 months. Uh, so I guess I want to see why. I think that cost of goods has steadily increased from COVID to today, but wages have not gone up in comparison to cost. So I think at some point that's a really bad math equation, right? Everyone's spending more and more and more for the same products, but their wages haven't significantly gone up. So I think that we're going to go through a little bit of a restructuring of what the world looks like in this environment. And that's why I think what we're trying to focus at Baya Bar is how do we keep the products affordable while still putting out high quality, because we don't want to sacrifice quality just to keep cost down a dollar. I think the
Yeah.
customer on our side of the spectrum would appreciate, not saving $1 and getting a bad quality product. They'd rather get that higher quality product. Um, so I think the consumer behavior is something I'm keeping a close eye on, and it's a challenge right now. Keeping people coming in the doors, and then on top of it, it's food and beverage, and our costs are always going up, not only from a cost of goods standpoint, but from a wage standpoint, a rent standpoint. So I think there's other ways to see how we can help streamline the business and keep costs down by maybe bringing in some sort of AI component or self ordering component, or down the road, I think for a brand of my size, 41 locations open with another 20 some odd in the pipeline, we're not bringing in robots anytime soon, but I think that's in the near future for a lot of the bigger brands.
Yeah, absolutely. How about excitement? What excites you most about the future for Baya Bar, or even just personally for yourself with the brand?
What excites me is that there is so much white space in the country, for Baya Bar.
Yeah,
And for those who don't know what white space is, basically like open areas, open territories that don't have Baya Bar or don't have brands like Baya Bar in that category, in that area, in that community. There's a couple of bigger brands that were bought and sold a few times now by private equity, and they're getting watered down. Their brand is getting cheapened up. They're not using high quality ingredients in their açaí and in their smoothies. They're getting away from organic and their cold pressed juices and things of that nature. Some of it I can understand. Some of it I heavily disagree with. But
yeah,
I think that a lot of these brands are starting to get watered down,
yeah,
and it's leaving the lane open for a brand like mine that is we're big enough where we have purchasing power to keep our costs down for our franchisees, but we're small enough to be very nimble in this
yeah,
environment.
yep,
So I'm really excited. I think the pathway to 150, 250 locations is right in front of us, and
yeah.
there's a lot of room for growth in the next 5 to 7 years.
Yeah, what excites me about your brand is it is very nimble. I look back to last July. I live in Minnesota. I was at a lacrosse tournament for like 8 freaking hours, and there's this table with a couple of young ladies selling acai bowls right out of their little wagon cooler from one of our local stores. You guys can kill it in the event space, stadium dining, like, it's such a great portable use, and I just there's so it's you guys don't have to just stay in the brick and mortar space, so I just feel like there's tons of opportunity, for the brand in terms of just events and open air areas, so,
I
not sure if
agree
that's
with you.
on. Yeah. Um, okay, so we talked about AI. I hear lots of fun ideas of how concepts are using it behind the scenes, employee scheduling, like we talked about with consumer trends understanding. What is one area that you feel like, as an industry, we could probably use the most focus on for improvement in the next 5 years? And it can be related to how we might incorporate AI or just in general. Where's a blind spot do you feel like in the restaurant space and in food service industry in particular?
Oh, that's a great question. I think this is gonna maybe sound like it's out of left field. I think one of the big problems is that a lot of food and beverage brands now I'm going more on the smaller side, right? Because we want to really help the people who are small mom and pop and mid-size.
Yeah.
I think a major blind spot is bad rent and bad
Mm,
leases.
mhm.
Um,
Give up a
you
lot
know,
at the beginning in a bad lease. Yeah.
yeah, I see this across the board and it bothers me so much because you have brokers who bring deals to the table constantly, and their best interest is not your longevity. Their best interest is getting their sales commission.
Yeah.
And a lot of the famous word that brokers use are comps, 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 comps. So okay, so because someone else signed a bad lease, I have to comp my rent to their rent. Well, what if they did a bad job? Why are we comping it to them? Who said that they signed a good lease? So I see a lot of people lacking information on good lease structures. And let's call a spade a spade. Yes, you need to have great product. Yes, you have to have great customer service. Yes, you have to work your tail off. But you also need to be able to mitigate risk, right? At the end of the day, you need to also make sure that you have a foundation for long term growth. What does your bottom line costs look like? What do your rents look like? That's a big thing. We could get into all of the things that people need to look at in terms of AI and customer experience. Let's go a little bit more nitty gritty, nuts and bolts, picks and shovels. Rents are out of control. Insurance is out of control. And people need to be a lot more mindful of that because they're just taking these, what they believe to be as main and main great locations, and then they can't weather the storms. Most food and beverage businesses, they take about 2 to 3 years to hit their stride. organically people learn about them, their staff gets comfortable being in the store, they iron out the kinks of that specific location. Well, you may have some bumps along the way, and if you have a rent that's, pretty high, that might not make it sustainable, to
Yeah.
get through those bumps. So that's something that I want a lot of people to keep in mind when it comes to growing and what the market looks like today. And I know this because I'm in the market. I have 41 locations. We're signing leases and doing construction all over the country now, and leases and construction costs are through the roof right now. So it's something that people have to be very mindful of.
Yeah. I'm so glad I'm so glad you brought that up. I think not enough people talk about that. It happens at the very beginning of someone's process, and like I said, you give up a lot early on in that contract. So great answer. We're going to head towards the end here with a few what I call final mile questions. Again, I'm a runner. So before I forget to, I want to encourage you, if you haven't already, to think about the New York Marathon as it runs through all five boroughs. That'd be so cool, connecting back to your experience with that culture and how that connected you to Baya Bar and the need out there. Have you thought about running it? Do you run?
So my good buddy, he got into running. He's always been a little bit of a runner, but he got really into it a couple of years ago, and he's done
Okay.
the marathon, I believe, the last 3 years.
Okay.
But he's been pushing me, pushing me, pushing me. I told him I want to be realistic about my ability to do the marathon. I want to be able to time manage and carve out proper training for it. I don't want to
Okay.
just go into it, you know, I don't want to procrastinate my way through training and then collapse on the day of. So it's definitely something I want to do.
Yeah.
If I'm being realistic, I think it's not going to happen this upcoming fall, maybe the following year. There's a lot of big personal things that are happening this year. We just had the third kid. We're moving. We have a lot of stores that are opening up. I think that there'll be a little bit more stability next year, and that'll give me some time. But I think that's a great, great idea, and I want you to hold me accountable for doing that in the future.
I'll train you, or if your buddy needs a plan. I ran it. And, I've been to New York several times, but for me, the great, luxury was being able to experience the culture of all 5 boroughs back to back on the road. I mean, to have a red carpet laid, out for you. It was the day after Halloween, the year that I ran it, so everyone was still out in their costumes. It was truly one of the most remarkable marathons I've ever ran, and I've ran over 100. It is just such a phenomenal city, and I had such a great experience, so I can't wait to run it again, but
Awesome.
okay, so who has influenced your thinking the most in your career? Can be a
Wow.
quick answer.
That's not a quick answer. I mean, listen, everyone goes back to like the influencers and the people they follow, and there's a couple of big ones that I really love. From a
Yeah,
motivation standpoint, it was Eric Thomas in the early days of Wall Street. Um, I've
yeah.
I've followed Gary Vaynerchuk for a very long time, and lucky enough to become friends with him over the
Aw,
last couple of years. So he's been a huge influence. And then there's the other ones. I'm a big Alex Hormozy guy now. But I
yes.
have to
Oh
say,
my gosh, love him.
Hormozy's like he's like my number 1 right now. But really going back, to maybe it's cliche, maybe it's not. My mother. My mother, um, huge influence on me. Didn't have the easiest, childhood. Um, Grew up, not the easiest childhood. And she made her way in the media world in New York, where women were really not in that world at all in the
Yeah,
80s. And she made her way into that world and had a very successful career in New York media. Um, and she always supported everything I did. Anything that I wanted to do, she told me to do it and try it. You know, and again, my father was great also, hard worker, was a New York City police officer.
yeah,
But he had a little bit more of like the conservativeness to him, like, hey, take that city job, take that 9 to 5 with a good pension. And he's always supported me. But mom, I gotta say, really was always supporting and a fan of whatever I did, never questioned it, always just assumed like he's gonna be successful, he knows what he's doing, he's a hard worker, and really, really supported me from a young age. And I think that that helped give me the confidence early on. And then it kind of snowballed from there. But I think she was really the one that started the snowball.
That's awesome. Shout out to all the moms out there. I've had that answer a lot on here, and I think it just is such a great reminder as parents just how important it is. We're involved in so much; we get spread in so many different directions. But for these little bodies that are in our house, constantly throwing that encouragement and support out to them, they they thrive. They thrive with it, and they always remember it. So I love that answer, and I think it's a great reminder. If you guys haven't listened to the podcast, The Game, that's Alex, who he referenced. I'll put that in the show notes. I listened to that episode or that show. It's incredible. He's fast, he's intelligent, and he's got great interviews on there. Um, I will finish with one more question, and that goes back to your whiteboard. So you've mentioned being kind of a whiteboard thinker. You've put a statement on it or a word for last year, and I also want to know what you put on it for this year, if you don't mind sharing with us.
So you want me to talk about last year's first?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
last year, the big headline on the whiteboard and in my planner, my now I know you're gonna know who I'm talking about, Jesse Itzler. I had my big ass calendar that from Jesse. Um, so I wrote it in there as well, and it was make no money for 2025. Make no money, and that's kind of a shocking statement when your employees, coworkers, anyone who comes into the office sees that. Potential franchisee, they might be like, what the hell? Make no money. I don't know if I want to franchise with this company. But what I meant by that was make no profits, reinvest the money
Mm,
that we were making last year, reinvest it into the brand, reinvest it into marketing, reinvest it into people, reinvest to continue building a strong foundation for this company. And
yeah.
it's hard when you don't take money that's sitting there and you reinvest it, not knowing if it's going to be good for the company long term. But that's what business is. Business is reinvesting. Business is, doubling down and tripling down, and trusting your gut. And that was the goal for 2025. The goal for 2026. So I haven't written it on the board yet because I'm kind of still fine tuning it.
Okay.
Um, but my goal for 2026 is to build really good processes at Baya Bar. So one of the best books I've ever read, and I was gifted it, is a book called Traction by Gino Wickman.
Love it. Yeah.
So, phenomenal book. It gives you real data on what to do, how to do it, and actionable items. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I'm focusing on in 2026 now is how do we get a lot more intentional with our day-to-day tasks at Buy a Bar. And it's kind of like a couple of answers here, me delegating more. And one of the things that I want to focus on is on the growth of the business, working on the business, not in the business. And you have to put those systems and processes in place to be able to do that. You don't just start doing it tomorrow. So that's what I'm working on now. That's going to be the goal for 2026, is to work on the business, work on the processes and the systems, and let the workers who are so fantastic that I have work in the business and handle the day-to-day minutia and the grenades, and let me continue growing the brand.
Great. I'm going to link that book as well. It's called Traction. Again, a systems based approach to your business. It is an awesome, awesome book. We read it as a company over here. And we all, live, eat, and drink by it. So if you guys do not follow Billy yet, please go and find him on LinkedIn. He's got so many great nuggets, just like you've heard today. And we will go ahead and link him or link his LinkedIn on the show notes as well. And of course, the company website for
And
Baya Bar.
Instagram also. Add
Oh,
Billy Loesch on Instagram.
okay. When we'll put his Instagram handle on there too. Thank you so much, Billy. You have been such a stud, and I really enjoyed this conversation with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. You finally got me nailed down. So this was great. And I look forward to many more conversations.
And to our audience, if you learned something today or laughed, please tell someone about this podcast. This has been another awesome episode of Grounded. Thank you. You did great.